This is the story of an old man, salt, tyranny, and the single step that sparked his journey of becoming a leader that changed the world. Today's story is called The Old Man and the Salt.
Welcome to The Story. In this season of The Story, we highlight 8 individuals who underwent radical personal transformations to better serve themselves, their loved ones, and civilization. And now, on to the story.
The wind blew and kicked up dust in the old man's eyes. Tears formed as he tried to blink out the dirt. His glasses had blocked most of it. He took them off and carefully wiped them. At 61 years old, his vision wasn't what it used to be. The young boy by his side was impatient and asked, "Sir, is this it?" "Yes, these are all the people that have joined us," the old man said. The young boy rolled his eyes. "But sir, there are only 60, maybe 70 people here." "Yes, isn't it amazing?" The old man's growing smile revealed a toothless mouth. The young boy couldn't understand how the old man was always optimistic. The ragtag crowd in front of them were not an intimidating bunch, and neither was their old leader. It was early morning, but it was already a sweltering 90 degrees. The young boy wiped the sweat from his brow and surveyed the situation. His eyes turned back to the old man. They hadn't even begun their journey, and the old man was already leaning on his walking stick. He stood 5 foot 5 inches tall and tipped the scales at only 109 pounds. He wasn't intimidating, but when he spoke, people listened. The old man bowed to the small crowd and said, "Now we walk." He turned and began walking down the dusty road. The trek in front of them was staggering. Walking slowly behind the old man, the boy couldn't believe he was actually following him. He had never traveled to where they were headed, and there would be serious consequences if he was caught. This was not the first time the old man had led a group of people in this manner. Nearly 40 years earlier, he was riding a train. An elderly man riding next to him in the first-class compartment rang for the attendant and said, "This young man should not be riding in this car." The young man reached into his coat pocket and said, "But I have paid for a first-class ticket." "You'll have to move to the back of the train," the attendant said. The young man refused. The attendant grew hostile, but the young man remained calm and stood his ground. At the next station, the railway employees literally threw the young man off the train. Humiliated, shaken, and bruised, yet resolved, he made a vow that night to try, if possible, to root out the disease of prejudice and suffer hardships in the process. Nearly 40 years later, looking down the dusty road, the man was now leading a humble group of people on a journey to do just that, root out the disease of prejudice. 1 step turned to 2, and then 3. By the end of the day, the old man and his group had walked 12 miles. They bedded down on mats on the ground for the night. The old man talked in front of the cooking fire for a bit. The boy thought the old man might try to persuade the group to continue walking, but all the old man spoke about was economics and salt. Soon, people from the nearby town drifted around the fire. Suddenly, his simple style of conversation turned complex. The boy grew drowsy. It was hot, dry, and the last thing he wanted to hear about was salt. He drifted off to sleep. In the morning, the boy awoke and took his position close behind the old man at the front of the march. As their group left the town, dozens of people poured out of their homes and joined them. The sun beat down on them, and again they walked 12 miles before bedding down for the night. The old man talked to everyone along the way, and people from the next town joined the group to listen, and the old man spoke about salt. This time, the boy listened, and he began to understand. Chills ran down his spine. At that time, producing salt for personal use was illegal. Everyone knew that. The boy shuddered in fear. The old man explained that they were on a journey to the sea and they were gathering protesters to join their march. The crowd talked late into the night. The boy fell asleep and tossed and turned with nightmares of being thrown into jail. That same pattern of marching 12 miles during the day and then speaking at a town in the evenings continued for 23 more days. On the final morning, the boy noticed the smell of salt in the air. He thought how absurd it was that a law prohibited producing or collecting something that was a part of nature. As they continued, the old man was well aware that his little band had grown. The crowd of protesters now numbered in the tens of thousands. Toward the end of the march, his fireside conversations shifted from economics and salt to something new: satyagraha. The old man explained how the group must be committed to that word and the approach it implied. In English, satyagraha means to reveal truth and confront injustice through non-violence. The old man insisted that everyone in the crowd knew the word and how to apply it. Fears of being imprisoned continued to race through the boy's mind, but so did the idea of freedom. The old man assured the people with his words, "As long as we are non-violent, we have nothing to fear." The logic of the old man seemed sound. He had carefully assessed the situation and saw that all the oppression rested on a single substance: salt. In those days, the people of India were banned from harvesting, producing, or consuming salt that didn't come through the British Empire and their heavy tax. Everyone needed salt. The old man focused the attention of the crowd on that monopoly. That was the first place where satyagraha would work. The mass of people crested a hill, and the boy heard the crashing waves of the Arabian Sea below. The beach normally sparkled with crystallized sea salt after every high tide, but on this day, the police had caught wind of the movement of people and had raced ahead of the crowd to the beach. Early that morning, they had crushed the salt deposits into the mud. As the crowd approached, they watched the old man, but the actions of the police did nothing to stop him. The old man stooped down and dug a lump of salt out of the mud. That simple action was symbolic and illegal. After 24 days and 241 miles on foot, the crowd witnessed this act of defiance. The old man carried the lump of salt to the front of the crowd. There, he stood with nothing but his glasses and a walking stick, wearing a loincloth. He cleared his throat, held up the lump of salt, and then announced, "With this, I am shaking the foundations of the British Empire." The crowd erupted into cheers. Thousands followed his lead and rushed the beach to dig up salt. Thousands more harvested salt from beaches around the country. A movement had started. Soon after, the people began to call the old man Mahatma, which means great soul. But you might know the old man by his last name, Gandhi. British officials did not take the acts of Gandhi's nonviolent defiance lightly. That first act led to the arrest of 60,000 people. Gandhi himself was arrested. Yet the satyagraha continued. It was the starting point of Indian freedom and the British exit from India. Gandhi famously said, "You must be the change you want to see in the world." With these words, he set a new standard and preached what he practiced. That statement places the responsibility of addressing society's flaws squarely on the shoulders of every individual. It's not an indictment, it's an invitation to adventure and a mission that matters. So what changes do you want to see in the world? Or what about just in your world? When each of us move toward becoming the change we want to see, we can create a more beautiful world. We can fight injustice, brutality, prejudice, violence, and intolerance by centering our lives on kindness, peace, and love. And the only thing stopping us from tackling them head-on is ourselves. You may think, I'm just one person. What can I do? But if Gandhi could overthrow the most powerful empire in the world when he was toothless, poor, and at an age where most people are ready to retire, don't think, what can I do? Think, what can't I do? That's his story. What's yours going to be?
The story is brought to you exclusively by Salesforce, the world's #1 customer relationship management platform. More than 150,000 businesses are using Salesforce to blaze their own trails to success. You can learn more at salesforce.com. The story is created by our team at mission.org, a media company and podcast network.